lead us to places that we know we're called to go to. All right, I've not walked this way before. Do you know you're the first church I've ever pastored? You're like, yes, we know. We've experienced it. But I can tell you, even at times when I thought to myself, what am I doing up here? I'm just reminded of that moment when I was a little boy up in the old sanctuary when the Holy Spirit said, you're going to pastor this church. I was watching that man preach, and he said, you'll be next. I said, okay. That was a long time ago. But the Lord has sent someone into our life, and Ken and Missy Roberts, the Lord has ordained our paths for it to cross. And yesterday he did a leadership session, and we had a packed loft, and it was just a dynamic time, and it was anointed and changed our lives, didn't it, leadership team? And by the way, when I say leadership team, it wasn't just people in positions of leadership. We opened it up to anyone who feels a call to leadership. Maybe they hold no office yet, but they were invited, and many of them did come, and the Lord is developing them. Leadership is discipleship. It's us being discipled in the things of Christ. And so Ken is an international speaker of pastors to pastors. He has an apostolic gift, comes from Pentecostal roots, and he and his wife Missy have been just a blessing to us. And so would you help me welcome to our Charity Church pulpit, Pastor Ken Roberts.
Love you, man. You're doing a good job. Really, really good job. Hey, good morning, everybody. Awesome. I love feedback, so thank you for doing that. Amens, yes, ohs, anything like that feels good. Anything like that, I appreciate anything but rotten tomatoes. So no rotten tomatoes, okay, if you do that. We are honored to be here. My wife and I, Missy, really are, and I want to say that we have been welcomed, warmly welcomed. We came in on Friday, and he said we did some leadership thing yesterday, and we've had a chance to be with Pastor Paul and Shelley, and it's just been an awesome time. And Charity Church is special, and every place I go, I don't say that. We've had there's been a very open heaven here. There's a real warmth. There's a real drawing of the Holy Spirit. I've enjoyed worship in both meetings about as much as I have any place I've been in a while, and so God's He's really, really good. This is a really, really, really good place. My wife loves you. I do too, but my wife even more. She has a nose to sniff things out, and as soon as she came in, she said, man, I love this place. I love what's happening here. I love the people here, so she's already trying to get us to move here from Cleveland, Ohio. But we get as much rain and as much snow in Cleveland as we do as Indianapolis, so I think we'll probably just stay there. But anyhow, we love being here. Let me tell you a little bit about who I am, then I'll jump right into the Word just to really watch our time. I'll be efficient with our time today. Is that my dad, when I was 7 years of age, I was born in Niles, Michigan. Niles, Michigan is right across from South Bend, Indiana, where Notre Dame is at. And I was born there, and my dad, at the age of 7, he felt a call into the ministry. And he was able to get a church in Savannah, Tennessee. Savannah's on the Tennessee River. And so he sold everything we had. We had a little 5-acre plot. We weren't farmers, but a lot of 5-acre land there. And he sold everything. Paid off our debts. We had a lot of debts. We piled everything. There was already 6 kids. He already had 6 kids. Piled everything, in a truck, and we moved south. You ever seen the Beverly Hillbillies? That was us. We moved south. My dad started pastoring, and so I grew up in Tennessee. And at the age of 7, I gave my heart to Jesus Christ. It was in my dad's little Assemblies of God church in Savannah, Tennessee. It was on a Sunday night. I don't remember what he spoke on, but I still remember the time. And I raised my hand and made a commitment to Jesus Christ. I came down front, knelt at the altar, responded. I just turned 63 right around Thanksgiving. And so if I do my math right, I've been saved on this journey 55, for almost 56 years. And that's been a long, long time. Say long time, please. Long time. Say you look old. No, I thank you very much, but I appreciate that. But been on this journey a long, long time, and I can say to you that in general, I've been on the journey, I've been a faithful follower of Jesus Christ. I don't say that with elitism or arrogance or pride, but just say since the age of 7, I've tried to follow him. I've really never been in a ditch. I've never gotten a detour. I've never been in major areas of compromise in my life. I've never gone off the path and then come back on. So I'm really, really thankful for God's grace. After I graduated from college, I went to Central Bible College, which is kind of the headquarters for the Assemblies of God. That's my background. And after I graduated from college, I helped plant a church in Cleveland, Ohio. And I was there for 25 years pastoring that church. I was on the team, part of the pastoral team for 5 years, and then I became the point guy or the senior leader for 20 years. So I was there 25 years. And then I went through some shifts in my life, also my leadership. I'll tell you that story in just a moment. And then ended up moving to Minneapolis. Cleveland wasn't cold enough, so I moved to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I was there for 8 years pastoring a church there, and God did some wonderful things. When I was in my late 50s, about 58, I would say about 58, I sensed that God was leading me into another season. Say season, if you would, please. Season. And when you think about it, all of our lives is simply an accumulation of seasons. Whether you're 27, 37, 47, 63, whatever age you're in, if you think about it, the accumulation of where you're at right now is just an accumulation of seasons. You've had different seasons in your life, and you put them all together, that spells your life. So at the age of 58, I knew that God was leading me into a new season. And I've been pastoring for about 33 years, but there was a sense that I began to ask God, if I have a clear mind and a healthy body for the next 15, 20 years, what do you want me to do as far as a contribution to the church, contribution to the kingdom? And God began to lead me into a new direction of ministry. And so now what I do, since the last 4 years, we moved back to Cleveland, Ohio. Much of my family's in Cleveland. We moved back there. In the last 4 years, I've been hitting 3 nails. And one nail that I hit is really to help followers of Jesus Christ live a fruitful and productive life so that we would have a good stewardship in our own life. Because I hope that in my life, and I hope it's the same for your life, that one day when I get to heaven and when God comes up to me, He will say to me, I'm looking for these words. I'm longing for these words, and He will say to Ken Roberts, well done, good and faithful servant. So I want to live a life that's purposeful, that's intentional, that's fruitful, that's a stewardship of what God's given me, the life He's given me. So when I get to heaven, I can give Him something back and say, God, with the grace that you've given me in my life, I want to give you something back. And here's what I have to give you back, is what I've done with the life that I've been upon the earth. So I try to help people to live a fruitful life, a focused life, a life of stewardship. The second thing that God's led me into, and the second nail that I've been hitting for the last 4 years, and I believe I'll hit this for the next 15 or 20, is to help pastors live well while they lead well. I grew up in a pastor's home. I've always been around the church. I love the church. I've been pastoring for 33 years. I've been in ministry for about 40 years now. So I know the dynamics of the church world, and I know the challenge of it is to lead. And it's probably more challenging today than it's probably ever been because of the things that have changed in our culture, the things that have changed in the church world. And you may or may not be aware of it, but today the stats of the dropout, burnout, fallout rate among pastors in the churches in the United States of America are at an all-time high, and it's growing every year. The stats today are only 1 out of 10 who start end up. So if there's 10 who start in ministry, only 1 of them will end up in ministry, and that's for different reasons. You're all aware of stories of pastors who've gotten in trouble and who've checked out and who've got addicted to things and who've run off with the secretary and have skimmed money off the church and have, all those type of things. So it's difficult to lead. It's difficult to lead over the long haul and to stay healthy ourselves as we're leading. And what I mean by healthy is that we are becoming a true, authentic follower of Jesus Christ ourselves, not as a pastor, but simply as a son or daughter of Jesus. Ken Roberts wants to be a lover of Him, I'm doing something so that I can then lead others or be a pastor. And I've come into Pastor Paul's life really just because of that, so we can then walk together. And God's doing some significant things in his life and in a new season that I believe He's leading him in and leading the church in as well. So I love to work with pastors. I'm not a sage. I'm not an elitist. I'm just simply a fellow traveler. And I know some of the pitfalls. I know some of the ditches. I've got some arrows in my rear to show that I've been leading for a long time. I know what those things are, and just to continue moving those. And then the third thing that God's really put on my heart and helped me with, the third nail to hit, is to partner with local churches for their ongoing growth and health. Just where they're at and where God wants them to be, to come alongside and help. I'm not a consultant. I'm just a friend in the kingdom, and that's why God has really led me here. And I just want to say to you, don't want to overstate this, but Missy and I honestly do feel a real connection here, and there's been an openness, and God's been using us. You can usually tell if you're at the right place at the right time, and Pastor Paul, we feel like we are. So we thank you for being here and allowing us to be here. If you go to the book of Joshua, and also on your seat, you should have had an outline. And if you want to pick that outline up, there should be on the seat somewhere an outline. And take notes if you would. I think it will help you. We'll move through this, probably be effective with our time, but I want to move through this. And I want to talk to you today about these new seasons that I was just talking about. And I want to talk to you about faith forward. I want to talk to you about faith forward. And I want to talk to you about moving into the next season God has for you. Now, when you listen to me over the next, 20 minutes or so, do this. Think about what I have to say on two different levels. Think about moving into a new season on an individual level for your own life. Whatever season you're in, wherever you're at in your journey, think about you moving into the next season that God may have for you. So think on an individual level. But also as you hear me communicate, hear me teach on some things, think about it in the we context of Charity Church. Matter of fact, say we. One more time, say we. So there's the individual, there's Ken Roberts who has his own journey with Jesus, but there's also their spiritual families or spiritual communities or local churches that have their ongoing journey as well. So I'm going to talk to you about faith forward and how to move into your next season. Joshua chapter 1, and I think the scriptures will be on the slide, and if you'll follow along with me. Here's what the Word of God says. It says, after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua the son of Nun, who was Moses' aide, he said, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I'm about to give to them, that is to the Israelites. Verse 3, I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. Your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon, and from the great river, that is the river Euphrates, all the Hittite country, and to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. So he was giving them their assignment. Verse 5, no one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Be strong, because of this new assignment. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give them. Now go down to verse 10 if you would. Verse 10 says this, Joshua ordered the officers of the people. He said, go through the camp and tell the people, get your provisions ready, because 3 days from now you will cross the Jordan here to go in and take possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving you for your own. Let me give you the first point here, and it's on your outline. If you want to fill it in, it'll be on the slide. The first point is, when you're moving forward, is when a new season is occurring, we need to recognize it and respond to it. When a new season is occurring, we need to recognize and respond to it. And you see this in verse 1 and verse 2. And basically the writer is saying that now Moses is dead. A generation has died off into the wilderness because of their disobedience. Joshua, the new leader, has come up. And then he says, now then. So he's saying you had a season, and a new season's coming. Now then, get ready to move into your new season. Now in the Bible, there's about 3 different Greek words for the word time. But I want to share with you 2 of those words. One word that's in the Bible about the word time is the word chronos. And chronos is the whole idea of chronology. It's where we get the word chronology. And it's the idea that time is moving in a linear way. So chronos is a day, a week, a month, a year. It's the way we live most of our life. We just moved into a new chronos. We just moved into 2020. New year and a new decade. So that's the idea of chronos. I'm 63 years of age. That's my chronos. So there's an understanding of time as chronos, but another Greek word in the New Testament for the word time is the word kairos. And what kairos is, if chronos is linear, moving along, marching along, kairos is like an EKG. It's like it's going along and then it has a spike. And then it's going along and it has a spike. And what you find in the Bible and what you also find in our own life individually and what you find in the life of local churches is you will find that we are living life in chronos, and most of our life is chronos. It's consistency, it's perseverance, it's day after day, it's discipline, it's learning to be a consistent and mature follower of Jesus Christ. But then there are times when we have kairos, where God does a spike in our life. It's an open time and it's an open door. And it's a time that we want to enter into when we have those times that come, those new seasons that he says, now's a kairos, it's coming, now's an open door. We see this in Luke chapter 19, I think it is, verse 44, where it says this. It says that Jesus came to Jerusalem, but the people of Jerusalem didn't realize that it was their Kairos time. They didn't realize that the window, the spike had opened up, and the Messiah had come to them. They didn't recognize the time, so they didn't receive him. Galatians 4:4, it says it this way. It says that God waited chronos. God waited over the years and waited over the time and waited over the decade. Then verse 4 of Galatians 4 says, and at just the right time, kairos, everything was now set up and the door was open, the right window was open, and he was saying, now is the time for the Messiah to come into the world. That's the idea of kairos. So for all of us, here's what happens. We have chronos times. Churches have chronos times, and you have kairos moments. And what we see here in Joshua is we see the children of Israel, he's saying, now is the time to move in. You've been in chronos, now there's kairos, there's an open window. So you and I, it's important that we recognize it when it's happening in our life, and when we recognize it, that we respond to it. Because let me just say it this way, I don't want to say it in a condemning way, because God's a God of mercy and grace. But kairos, the window's not always open forever. You can miss God in a season of your life. You can miss God in a season of your family. You can miss God in a season of a local church. Now, because God's gracious, he'll circle back around. He'll let you be in the wilderness for a while. And he'll circle back around, but because he's a gracious God, and he'll give you a kairos again. He'll give you an open door again. But you have to realize that it doesn't always just stay open where we can just kind of, thumb our fingers, and whistle in the dark. There's a time where God says, now, it is now enter in. And when that's happening in your life and in the life of a church, you need to recognize it and you need to respond to it. A little second point there, it's a sub-point in your outline, but it says this. When new seasons occur, it's important to honor our past, but to not idolize our past. Many people get stuck in our past for different reasons. And sometimes churches get stuck in the past because they not only honor their past, but they idolize it. Let me give you a couple of illustrations. When I was 5 years of age, we still lived in Michigan, Niles, Michigan, what I told you about earlier. And my dad, once he got off work on Fridays, my mom's folks lived in southern Missouri, a little town called Zenith, Missouri, and they owned a little 40-acre farm, cotton farm. And we would, on Fridays, many times after Dad got off work, there were 6 kids at the time, we would jump in the car and drive the 600 miles from Niles, Michigan to southern Missouri. And we would drive during the night. It was a good thing as parenting. We'd all just fall asleep. And, there was no seat belts back then, so, we slept in the window. You did that? You ever do that? We slept, on the floorboard. There was 6 of us, so we just found wherever we could, but we would drive all night. But my grandma's house was at the end of a really long lane, a dirt lane. And there was a little white house, what you would think about just in the 40s and 50s and 60s, little farmhouse. And when we got to my grandma's lane, it was almost a mile from the house. We got to we called it Grandma's little lane. My parents would always wake us up because we knew we were close to home. And Ken, they called me Kenny, my hair would be sticking up, and I was freckled at the time, and we're almost to Grandma's house because we're turning down Grandma's lane. I've had so many great memories of being at Grandma's house for 15, 20 years that I love going to my grandma's house. Anybody with me? But guess what? They sold the farm 35 years ago, and I haven't been back since. So I can honor it, but I shouldn't idolize it because life has moved on. How many of you don't have to yell at me, but how many of you are still living in the past? But that's not what life's about. It's about seasons where God continues to move us on. When I was pastoring in Cleveland, the church I told you about there, it was birthed in the 80s, and in the mid-80s, we hit a Kairos moment. God just opened up an open door for us, and we hit a season of revival. And for about 10 years, we just saw people being healed, saved, baptized, delivered, water baptized in the Holy Spirit. It was just a thing that God was doing. It was a Kairos moment. We had about a 10-year period, and I'm not overstating it. We had thousands of people water baptized in bathtubs all across the city of Cleveland, Ohio. So what I want to do is I want to honor God for doing that. You know, in my own heart, I want to honor God, but I don't want to idolize it. Why? Because today is 2020. And here's the thing. God has moved on, and I got to move on with him. Now, it doesn't make any difference to me how long you've been saved. You can still get stuck. Whether you've been saved or maybe you're still on this journey. Maybe you haven't made that commitment yet, but you're checking this Jesus thing out. Or maybe you've been saved for 50 years or 55 years or 60 years or 17 years or whatever, and you've had Kairos moments in your life. Oftentimes when we come to Jesus, it's a Kairos time. It's such a rich time and sweet time, and the window is open for us, but it's not always a Kairos time. Oftentimes then you move into Chronos, and it's consistency and being persistent. But the thing we have to watch about that is we can get stuck or miss a new season that comes to us. The same thing can happen with churches as well. So the first point about Joshua here is when a new season comes, we want to recognize it and we want to respond to it. Let me give you the second point here. The second point is God is always a God of new opportunities. And you can see this in verses 3 and 4. We won't reread it. But basically what you had is God said to Moses in that generation, he said, listen, you can't cross the Jordan River. That's your boundary. Because of disobedience, you've now got to stay in the wilderness. You can't cross the Jordan. That's your boundary. But guess what? In the new season with Joshua and the new generation, he said, the Jordan is no longer your boundary. You can now enter into your boundary. And he said, matter of fact, you can now pass over the Jordan, and I'm going to show you everything, all the territory, all the assignment I'm going to give you. And he laid it out there, what it was. A little side point, I didn't make it in the first meeting, but I feel like I need to make it here, is that where God assigns us is where he gives us authority to move into it. And he said for the children of Israel, he said, listen, this is your assignment. This is your territory. And if you'll live in your territory, then every place where you put your feet, I will be there and you'll have that land. So he gives them assignment, and with the assignment is with the authority. A little side note maybe to help you kind of think this out a little bit, is that for me, there are certain places that God has not given me an assignment, so when I go there, I don't have the authority. Matter of fact, when people ask me sometimes to go on missions trips, I just don't assume that God has given me the authority to go to that place or the assignment to go to that place. I want to first know that God is saying he's assigning me to go there. If he assigns me to go there, then the authority is there with it. And that's what he said to the children of Israel. He said, listen, in the past, the Jordan has been your boundary, but now it's the opportunity. It's a new season. For me, the date was March 9th. It was a Tuesday. And I had always taken Mondays off, so Tuesday was my first work day of the week. And I came downstairs on that Tuesday morning, and I made the coffee, and I went to the living room. And about 15 minutes later, my wife came, got her a cup of coffee, came in the living room, and we had our devotions together, and we prayed together, and then we talked about the schedule of the week. We talked about who's going to be where, when, and where do the kids need to be on Saturday, and who's coming over on Wednesday night, and all those type of just normal things you would talk about. We went back upstairs where our bedroom was at, and we kissed one another, and we told each other we loved each other. And then I headed off to work out. I headed off to the gym to work out, and my wife headed off to our church office and to drop our daughter off. Her name was Nicole. Nicole was 21 years of age, who was one of our receptionists. And I had just finished working out. I was on my way home. I was on Interstate 90, heading home. Had just gotten off the exit, and my cell phone rang. This was 2004. I picked my cell phone up, and it was my daughter, Nicole, and she said, hey, Dad, the hospital's calling for you. They need you at the hospital. Mom's had a wreck. At that time, we had no idea. Were they just checking her out for whiplash? You have a broken arm, maybe a broken leg. They weren't sure. You know what? We had no idea. I was almost home, my way home, and I stopped to pick up my son. My son was 19. His name is Britton. Stopped to pick Britton up, and we went on into the hospital. As soon as I got to the hospital, about 15 minutes away, they rushed me into the emergency room. And there in the emergency room, was my wife. Her name was Debbie. In a coma, and she never came out of it. She died 3 days later. The story is, once she dropped my daughter off at church, she went on to a women's Bible study, which she did every other Tuesday morning. And she was on a little 2-lane road. She was going 35 miles an hour, heading south. And they believed that she had a brain aneurysm. And when she had a brain aneurysm, she passed out. And when she passed out, she went through a red light. And it was a blind spot there. There was a convenience store and a pine tree. She was heading south, only 35 miles an hour. A young man on his way to work, only 21 years of age, in an SUV, had the green light, didn't see her, was only going 25 miles an hour, hit her in the door, her head hit the window, and between the trauma in her head and the brain aneurysm, my wife of 25 years at the age of 47 never came out of the coma. Her organs began to shut down. On Friday, that was a Tuesday, on Friday at noon, they pronounced her dead. Why am I telling you that story? Our past can get us stuck and get a ball and chain around us that will keep us from moving into our next season. If I would have allowed the enemy, I'll just say that, if I would have allowed the enemy to get me stuck there, I would have not been able to cross into my next and new season that God would open up to me. Matter of fact, one of the things that I'm just amazed at, I was a widower for 3.5 years, then God brought my wife Missy. We've been married now for 12 years. One of the things I've been amazed at is when that happened in my own life, Pastor Paul, when that happened in my own life, the biggest lies I had to deal with is that I would never have a meaningful ministry again, nor a meaningful marriage again. And that season of 2004, 2005, 2006 was my season of going through the valley of the shadow of death. But God didn't allow me to get stuck there. He actually did something in me in that season that when He said, this is now your new opportunity, the Jordan is no longer a boundary, now you can enter into the next season. God had done something into my life so that when I entered in the next season, I was prepared for what God wanted to do in my life in the next season. No matter what season you're in, He's preparing you for what's next if you'll move into it. Matter of fact, you have a little thing on the bullet, on the outline there you may want to write down. Our past is always the raw material to our redemptive future. Our past is always the raw material to a redemptive future. No matter what your past has been, no matter where you're even at right now, no matter where you've messed up, no matter what you've gone through, no matter who you've messed up as you've gone through it, God will, in His grace, will redeem that, and your past, if you'll allow Him, will become the raw material to a redemptive future. And He will say, you had the Jordan for a while, you couldn't cross over, but now's Kairos, now's the opportunity to enter in. Let me read something to you real quick, because I feel like that people in the room, I felt it in the first service as well, may be stuck in the past. That you have a ball and chain around you because something that's happened to you, something maybe you've done or someone else has done on you, or because of a type of life that you've lived or maybe even still stuck in, and you sense in your heart that there's a new season, God's saying, hey, new season, yet the ball and chain is there that needs to be then separated and broken off so you can move into your new season. Let me read this to you real fast. It's a little book I wrote about her death. It's called Unexpected, but here's what I said. The reality that our response to life shape us holds true for all of us. What we do in those seasons will determine who we become. Over the years, I've observed a variety of ways people have responded to difficulty and as a result have been shaped by it. Now you put yourself, there's going to be a leverage, one side of the equation, the other side of the equation. You determine which side you're in right now. Is there something in your life that has kept you, is holding you back? Is there something that has shaped you in a way that now you have a ball and chain around and you can't move into your next season? Here's what I said. Here's what happens. During these seasons, some become hardened, others more humble. Some become cynical, others more grateful. Some grow to resent life, others discover a deeper purpose to life. Some wilt, others bloom. Some learn to hate, others learn to love. Some become hopeless, others become resilient. Some are blown off course, others are moved into their destiny. I would have never in a million years guessed when I was going through my valley, season of the valley, 2004, that God would use that in my life and do something in my life, and that would actually end up moving me toward my destiny, not away from it. Let me just say to somebody right now, let me prophesy to somebody right now, if you've messed your life up in the past, it doesn't erase your life. If you'll work with God, He'll only work with you, and it will build something in your life. And as it's building something in your life, it will push you toward your destiny, not away from it. Amen. There's somebody in the room right now that believe that they've gotten off course and their destiny of their life has been canceled out. The destiny of your life has not been canceled out. No matter what you've experienced, no matter what you've done, no matter what you've done to others, if you will allow God to work in that season, He will break the chain off and say, you know what, you're no longer now the boundary of a Jordan. You can enter into a new season, and He'll use that new season in your life. Our past is always the raw material to our redemptive future. Let me give you one more point, and then we're going to end. Number 3, how to move in faith forward, how to move into our next season. Number 3, it's on your outline. God promises it, but we have to possess it. Look at verse 3 if you would. It says this, I will give you, some translation says, that I promise you. So God says, I will give you every place where you set your foot. Look at verse 11. He goes on to say, 3 days from now you will cross the Jordan to go in and take possession of the land the Lord your God is giving you. But here's the point. God said, I'm going to give you this land. I promise you this land, but what did He also say? He said that you have to possess it. And between the promise and the possession is always the battle. And what people don't realize, almost every time you're about to go into a new season, you're going to have some of the greatest opposition during those times. The enemy's not just going to say, hey, no problem, just move on into it. Yeah, just keep growing, just keep moving to your destiny. Yeah, just go into your Kairos moment. Yeah, just keep moving. The same thing's true in the church. Oftentimes, right before the greatest breakthrough in the church is the greatest battle. And here's what I find, and I find it sad, is that many times we don't really want to fight to possess our inheritance. My dad, who's my hero, he's 89 years of age, my dad used to box for the Golden Gloves when he was in his teens and early 20s. And my dad would then, there was 4 boys, and my dad, when we would get old enough, we thought we could take my dad on. So I'm 12, I had 2 older brothers, a younger brother. And Dad, just to play with us, we would always slap us open-handed, never really hit us. I'm sure a few times he wanted to, but he didn't, But it was always, we tried to move in there. And Dad would just let us kind of flail for a little bit. Then he'd go, boop, 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 boop. We knew, hey, Dad's still boss, and he still got it. But here's the thing He taught us. He taught us when you get in a fight, if you ever get off balance, you're in trouble. Because when you get off balance, the enemy just says, hey, now's the time. Boom! Dad said when you're going to fight, you got to stay balanced. When you start tripping and backing up, you're an open target for the enemy. There's some of you that God says, time for you to get off the ropes, get back behind the cross, get in the Word, be with a spiritual family, and learn to fight so you can come into your inheritance. Let me give you one more point, I'm going to end. Worship team can come up. It's the last thing on your outline. If for nothing else, take ground and move forward in faith for your children and your children's children. If for nothing else, take ground and move forward in faith for your children and your children's children. When my dad came back to the Lord in his early 30s, he already had 6 kids, as I told you. He was a part of a family that was very, very rough. He's got several brothers, at the time had several brothers in the South Bend, Indiana, the Niles, Michigan area that were alcoholics and brawlers and lots of different stuff. And my dad, when he came to Jesus Christ, the family tree split. But the offshoot of him fighting for his inheritance and moving in his season that God had for him is now that all my brothers and sisters, I'm the middle 7, all of our spouses and all of our families are now serving the Lord. My 2 kids are serving the Lord. I now have 2 grandsons, 4 months old and 4 years old, and now we're training them in the ways of the Lord. But where did that start? That started by somebody who made the decision to move in the area of their inheritance or their destiny that God had for them, to move into their seasons. And I want to appeal to you, especially to you men, continue to move with God for the sake of your children and your children and your children's children. Let's pray.